Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fugitive Chefs, the podcast about people who've stepped away from traditional kitchens to rebuild food in a more creative, personal, or sustainable way. Today's guest is Chef Imrun Texeira from Toronto. He's joining us. Thank you for joining, Imrun.
Thanks for having me.
So Imran actually comes recommended from one of our previous guests, from Nick of North, as you know him on Instagram. And he's told me a little bit about Imran. We'll know more about it. But from what we know, he's worked at some of the most famous restaurants you would have heard of all around the globe. And he's also had experience into what we call these television shows, right? You were on Top Chef, if I'm not wrong. And today, Imran does something I would say which is not traditionally working a restaurant kitchen job. And I'm very excited to hear about all of this. Also, I've heard about the Burnt Chef project, and I would also like to know what initiatives like that do and what role are you playing in that. But before we deep dive into all of that, Simran, can you please tell me, like, what is your first connection with food? What are your early food days looking like?
Yeah, so I would say early food memories started from a pretty young age. I think I was around 2 or 3, so toddler times, if you will. Just having the love and passion for food, so trying to cook food at home, more burning food or cutting myself than anything else. And I think the earliest memory was from around that age where I tried to cook bagels without cutting them or putting them in a toaster or even taking them out of the plastic bag, if you will. I ended up just putting the whole plastic bag of fresh bagels on the stove and just turning dials. And within a few minutes, the whole bag ended up catching fire. And I almost lit my house on fire on an Easter weekend here in Canada. So not the ideal way to wake up your parents at about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. But maybe I was ahead of my time because I was thinking about what sous vide was by trying to cook stuff in plastic bags. So who knows? But yeah, the passion for food definitely started at a young age, probably more so for eating and just experiencing different flavors, being from a very unique kind of background based on where my family have come from different parts of the world where they've grown up, and then being in, I think, one of the most multicultural countries in the world. There's so much kind of influence when it comes to food, flavors, cultures, inspiration, and so on. I just grew up with that kind of a wide variety. So for me, always trying to find new flavors as a young person, that's definitely where the passion came from. And then it just naturally evolved into getting more hands-on. So I started working in restaurants at about 13 or 14 years old. And then, yeah, here we are 16 years later.
So tell us a little bit about your early restaurant days, because as we were talking before we started recording, that you were the second Canadian on the show. And I feel even though restaurant kitchens are very much pretty common because chefs travel a lot and work in different kitchens, but still it's very curious for me, like, how did you find, like, how does career evolve in a place like Canada as a chef?
So I guess like it's pretty similar, I guess, to a lot of different places in the world, especially as we both know, after you work in certain types of kitchens around the world, they're very international. So you get to really mix and mingle with so many different chefs, hear their kind of background or their origin stories, if you will. And a lot of them start the same way. If it's young commie cooks and whatnot, or starting as a dishwasher. So I started at a washer at a local kind of chain restaurant, if you will, in my hometown of Ottawa, which is our nation's capital here in Canada. Definitely not glamorous food by any means, but just gave me that kind of early insight into what a professional kitchen really had to offer. The energy, the buzz, the kind of just the flow and whatnot. Again, we were making quesadillas, nachos, and chicken wings, so it wasn't anything revolutionary. But again, just trying to get my hands and or feet wet, if you will, to see what that world was like, and it was absolutely intoxifying in so many different ways. And I just love the energy. I've always been very high energy, if you will, based on how I operate as a person. Love working with my hands. Again, food as a passion started from a young age. So it was just great to have that, I guess, early entry into a kitchen in general, and then just started evolving from there. So after working at this chain restaurant, ended up working at, I guess, small Spanish wine and tapas bar. So seeing what that kind of cuisine had to offer. It was an open kitchen kind of concept as well. So completely different layout when it comes in terms to the restaurant. And then that led me into a high school co-op program. So I'm
Okay.
not too sure if this is like a universal thing in countries around the world,
Mhm.
but part of one of my years in high school, I believe this was grade 10 at the time, so I was around 15, 16 years old. I was able to do half the day in school at my high school, and then the other half working in the workforce, if you will. So there's so many different areas of work that we can go into. And I ended up doing my co-op placement at a local 5-star hotel within my hometown. So I was, again, 16 years old, most people around, maybe the youngest around 20, 25 years old, all the way up,
Mm-hmm.
working with some of the best chefs in the city at the time. It was one of the most glamorous hotels at that point. We had one of the best chefs running the restaurant slash hotel as well. So going from small chain restaurants, a small like boutique individually owned restaurant to a massive hotel of that caliber, cooking in their fine dining restaurant, their jazz bar, doing massive events for corporate functions, charity events, and whatnot. It was a huge operation, but amazing to see all those kind of moving parts at the age of 16. So cooking for high-end businessmen, diplomats, a lot of different celebrities, athletes, you name it. It gave me a crazy, like eye-opening experience to what the world of hospitality can really be, right? Where yeah, we're putting out great food, but when you're working within hotels or indoor resorts, hospitality is at the forefront, right? So, especially when you're working with some of the personalities of the icons that came through those doors, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very high touch point kind of operation that's going on. And that just ended up rolling into, I guess, more different kind of unique restaurants here in the Canadian landscape. So if it's French fine dining, Italian restaurants, more Spanish, I worked in vegan restaurants as well. So really just at that young age, trying to do everything possible from different styles of service, different styles of cuisine and whatnot, just to see where my passion or my kind of vibe was and what kind of styles of service that I really enjoyed. I think that was really good kind of advice I got from one of my chefs when I was young was to just try and get into every single different type of kitchen, not to really double down into a niche at that point early on in my
Mm-hmm.
career to really find what I loved, right? And I think all those experiences really helped create a pretty unique, well-rounded experience as I found where I think my voice or true calling was for a longer period of time after that.
Well, that's very interesting because I mean, the kind of program you're explaining, it sounds like very vocational. You get like early access into these workplaces, which I think is not very common today because most culinary programs these days a lot about theory, and then you have like I think short internships. I think they keep getting intense as the years go, but most people I think who end up choosing or like investing a lot into a kitchen career as a fee as a tuition fee for these culinary colleges have possibly never stepped into a kitchen, which is very strange in a career like this where it's so hands on, and then people invest. Some of them go into like a student debt in countries like India and Spain. I know people go into student debt just for a culinary college which doesn't have the best pay scale promised after the 4 years, and then you have never stepped into a kitchen. So how do you see that? Is the program that you mentioned still active in Canada? Are people taking that path, or have people more switched on to? Because I know many Indians actually go to colleges like George Brown and stuff after completing their bachelor's. How's the reality now in Canada?
So I think I could obviously speak from my perspective. Growing
Mm-hmm.
up here, I think the government and these kind of educational systems are starting to really put more of an importance on that kind of notion of getting early access to said careers. If it's in kitchens or whatever career that it is, these co-op placements and whatnot that start in high school offers that kind of zero risk opportunity to get hands-on experience, right? If it's becoming a plumber, teacher, electrician, whatever it is. It's the fact that you can get in real life experience in these top level kind of places and see what that kind of lifestyle could be like, that trade, whatever it could be, right? So that gave me that early kind of experience to see what these places had to offer us. Again, different chefs and whatnot gave me different advice when I worked at that hotel, but I absolutely loved it. And here in Canada, it's deemed as a trade, being a chef or a baker. So if it's similar within the trade system as becoming a plumber, electrician, carpenter, you name it. So there's certain kind of trainings that we can get to have a certification or a degree here as a quote unquote Red Seal chef. That is what we
Mm-hmm.
call it here in Canada, the Red Seal trades, where basically you get this certification after thousands of hours or years of training. So for me, I had to do years of training under other Red Seal certified chefs
Mm-hmm.
and write a test on top of that. So you have to have your theory and your hands-on kind of background knowledge, write a test, and then you have this certification. So on top of culinary school to have your diploma, you now have this certification basically deeming you as a master in your craft. So it definitely helps reinforce your own confidence and knowledge around your skill set. But also when you're going out to jobs, it's like almost a staple kind of documentation saying that you have this kind of benchline knowledge. So when it comes to the Canadian landscape, going into my apprenticeship program, which is working towards this certification, there's so many grants and bursaries coming into this line of work or into this culinary school training. So instead of me going into the cordon bleu or these more, say, traditional realms of post-secondary education, all of this was supported by the Canadian government. So for me, having a decently high GPA and
Mhm.
going through all my classes, I got grants and bursaries back. So in hindsight, I came out of culinary school with no debt. All my
Wow.
schooling was paid for because I had certain grades to match, and I got hands-on experience. So half the time you're in the classroom, in the culinary labs, in the school, and then the other half you're actually in the workforce, working and getting paid. So I was
Uh-huh.
basically getting paid to go to culinary school, learning from the best chefs in the city, the best chefs at the culinary school, being able to leave culinary school with little to no debt. And I was able to write my certification at the age of 21 years old, where most people would only be doing that at maybe 30, 31. So by the time I went to culinary school around 18, 19, I already had about 5, 6 years of culinary experience already from high school co-ops, young jobs and whatnot. So I already knew what the workforce had to offer. I was working full time while in culinary school. So by the
Mhm.
time I graduated, I was able to skip through a lot of the processes because of all this background knowledge. I had the highest certification I could have as a chef in Canada at the age of 21, no debt, and I was able to enter the workforce with a lot of confidence and stress off the shoulders of, again, debt that comes with post-secondary education.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a super cool system. I think a lot of systems need to look into this. I mean, of course, all systems have their faults, but I think the way you've highlighted it and the parts of it that you've highlighted, I think super important. I think academics are important, and of course, I don't think that. I think yes, the kitchen business or the being a chef has risen up a lot from being a blue collar job where you still can do a lot from all the theory that you learn. But in the end, I think the commitment comes down to whether you like being there or not. There is no other way out of that. Either you like it or you don't, because in many cases even today the driver for many people in the kitchen, the only driver is passion. And if that doesn't fulfill you, or if that is not your style of life, or if you're not used to doing the hours, or not even the hours, I think the hours and the times that people don't work on, like weekends or festivals and things like that, and if you don't like that atmosphere, I think maybe it's before you get into all these, like put your feet in the game so deep, it's better to know. And I think the platform that you mentioned provides that. And then you still get to do your culinary school, and you're going in there knowing exactly what you want to learn, and not just, whatever, I'll just swing by everything that comes. And also, like, most of these students then step into very fancy restaurants without having ever passed the, I don't know, being in a commissary in a hotel and seeing how operations work in a hotel, for example. I think you'd see a lot of parts of, as you mentioned, the big events and caterings and things like that, which are far from what fine dining is. And that's how most of the volumes you feed. But yeah, it's super super inspired by this module that if you
Yeah.
told me about.
And again, a lot of it happened by chance. I had a lot of good
Hmm.
mentors. If it's from high school, pushing me into the co-op placement. And because of that co-op placement, I was able to start working towards those hours I was mentioning to get this certification in co-op. So at the age of 16, I was signed up as a youth apprentice before I even got into culinary school. So for a program that normally lasts 1.5, 2 years, depending on your placements, I was able to finish the whole program in 6 months. And because of all this kind of, I guess, background skill, culinary instructors or chefs at school knew that I didn't have to do the basics at school. So they would take that extra kind of interest and give me bigger, better projects if it's in or outside of the kitchen, a lot of kind of more mentorship roles in those kind of classes. And then it opened up doors within the community. If it was charity events and whatnot, I was able to volunteer at, especially where I was in Ottawa. That is our nation's capital. That's where all the embassies, that's where our prime minister lives. So there's a lot of those kind of high profile events that happen on the regular. So getting the opportunities to cook for foreign diplomats and whatnot was pretty much a regular thing. And it was great having that skill set from the hotel, working with these big icons and being okay in the rooms, cooking in front of people, talking to them. Because that's, I think, another skill set a lot of people are not taught in culinary school is how to even present yourself in public on a stage or at these big galas and whatnot, right? So it's all these little things that I think maybe just happened by chance, but it ended up all coming together pretty well.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think it prepares you, in a much more rounded way and not just focused on one side of things. And I think,
Hmm.
yeah, that's super interesting, super cool to hear that from you. And moving on from there, Imran, like how was after Canada? Because you also went abroad, looked at other kitchens, worked at other kitchens, maybe learned other philosophies of looking at food, and then coming back to Canada. How was that as somebody Canadian? outside Canada. How was that experience for you?
It's I've always traveled a lot, more so obviously as an adult now than when I was a kid, but it was always great to just one see and meet people from around the world and see how cuisines and culture evolve and develop with immigration and migration, if you will. But when it comes to especially fine dining, because that is where I guess my heart really was pushed towards as I was growing up, getting to see what fine dining, the Michelin circuit, if you will, had to offer, because only up till recent we haven't had the Michelin guide here in Canada. So I wanted to see what that level of cooking was like, the hours, everything. What does that lifestyle really entail, right? And I didn't really have anything to really compare that to here in Canada, so I had to save some money and get overseas. So shortly after culinary school, maybe a year or so after, I ended up spending about 6 months to a year in the UK. A lot of my family live and come from London or different parts of England. So I was able to stage and do some small internships at different styles of restaurants. So I was able to spend some time up in Mayfair in central London to see what a tasting menu only restaurant was like in one of the richest parts of London. So it was Chef Claude Bossy's Hibiscus out in Mayfair years ago. So it was great to spend some time there seeing what that tasting menu format was like. We had a Canadian chef who is, I believe he was the CDC at the time. He just won the Roux Scholarship at the time as well. So he was on his way out to go work in San Fran at a 3-star as well. So it's great to see how many Canadians are out there to have that kind of connection to home. But again, seeing what a restaurant of that caliber takes to work there, right? So the 15, 16-hour days, and to see how many kind of moving parts or moving bodies take to pump out that kind of level of execution, and to see the style of food, right? I grew up obviously reading British kind of style cookbooks, being able to travel there a lot. I definitely have a big love or a soft spot in my heart for London and the UK. So getting to see firsthand how those kitchens run, but again, seeing maybe the differences, right? So you have this 2 Michelin star in Mayfair, glamorous white tablecloth kind of vibe. But then I went out to more of the countryside. So just on the outskirts of London, I think it was like one of the last train stops was Tom Carriage. So he has one of the highest rated pubs in the world. So a 2 Michelin star pub and some of the best pub food I've ever had in my life, but completely dialed. Massive team, massive operation, but seeing what it's like working in a 2-star tasting menu only and then a 2-star pub. So really trying to compare high quality cooking intent, but completely different styles of operation, different parts of the city and or country, right? So it's great kind of insight to see what the UK had to offer and the British kind of landscape when it comes to food and operations. And it definitely opened up my eyes what it takes to work at that level, but knowing that that love, passion, and intent can go into every single different style of operation. It's not just your high-end 15, 20 course tasting menus that deserves that kind of love and meticulous kind of touch to it. You can take that into every single operation. So it's great having that kind of insight at a young age before coming back to Canada to work at some more spots, to know one, what is out there, but also the intent that can be taken into any kind of restaurant that we go into.
That's super interesting. I mean, yeah, it's always like I think from your schooling life or like from your entry into the industry and then going these stints abroad, I think you've always looked for like diversity, versatility of seeing all these different sort of operations, and I feel that's very nourishing. I feel, I mean, it's a very different generation also. Like where there's one generation of kitchen which spends like years in one kitchen, and that's for them value, and for you in your case, I see all the value coming from the diversity of the kind of people you worked with, the kind of operations you've put yourself in. And coming from all these experience in restaurants, one thing also I read about you is I think it's called Wanderlust. When did that happen? Like, why that idea of like, why private dining? What was that exactly? And what was it that restaurants weren't fulfilling for you? Because that's for me, I think, the first instance of you getting into
Right.
this fugitive chef category, right?
Yeah, correct. So leading up to COVID, I was living in the south of England, so right on the southern coast of Brighton. Beautiful, beautiful area. And I was working at this British tasting menu, restaurant that focused on, of course, seasonal produce, but not using any spices whatsoever, not even black pepper. It was just beautiful produce. And I guess the only added element would be salt. So me having a big South Asian kind of background, not cooking with spices is pretty wild, but I've always been one to push myself out of those kind of comfort zones. But when unfortunately COVID popped off, And as I saw that wave across Europe of everything shutting down, I had internships across London, Ireland. I was supposed to spend some time in Italy, go over to Copenhagen as well. And all of these internships, they're all messaging me saying, oh, we got to cancel, we're canceling, and all this basically closing off. Me and my partner ended up deciding to move back to Canada. So our resident or her schooling was coming to an end, and London or the UK is not a cheap place to live when you're not making money, especially with restaurants shut down. And we had more of a support network in Canada. We ended up coming back to the Toronto area. So skipping forward a bit, coming out of the lockdown stuff that we all unfortunately went through around the world, a lot of the restaurants in Canada that I probably would have wanted to work at pre-COVID ended up closing down, unfortunately, for obvious reasons, and or changing business models. So if it's based on the flavors, the techniques, or the styles of services that I was drawn to at that point or still am, they are non-existent anymore, or they just completely changed their style. So I didn't really want to give up a skill set I've worked on for about 10 to 15 years. And I really wanted to keep pushing that out because I know there still is to this day a societal kind of body that wants that kind of service, if you will, when it comes to that blind tasting menu kind of format and whatnot, and having that kind of creative freedom, right? A lot of the flavors or the proteins and whatnot that I've grown up eating or I've worked with around the world, they aren't as, I guess, mainstream in restaurants here in Toronto or in Canada in general. Yes, it is very multicultural, but when you think of your top echelon kind of restaurants, they definitely gear more towards your Western European. So if it's your British, French, Italian, maybe you be more Nordic kind of style restaurants, which is beautiful. But when you think of the flavors from the parts of the world, especially because I've traveled a lot through South America or, of course, Asia, and especially in South Asia, where I'm from, you don't really see that representation based
But that's
on.
funny, right? It's curious what you say, Imran, because this has been like not, I wouldn't say bothering, but it does come in your mind because also like I mean I'm the first person to say that. I mean, as somebody who's born in India, I would feel more, I don't know, there'll be more inhibitions in me paying more for an Indian meal than say a French meal. Or like, where does this perception come from? And sometimes it's, yes, it's about comparing foie gras with chana masala. Maybe that makes sense. But sometimes it's just like the humblest of things. You will pay a bigger bill for a German, French, Dutch meal than you would for say a Peruvian place. You would not want to pay expensive, even though you're based in Europe and it's all being shipped from Peru.
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
And I think it comes down to like poor marketing, right? We've worked in these kitchens, right? To make a traditional French demi-glace is amazing. There's a lot of like technical kind of skill that comes into it. But for me, having roots in Goa, making a perfect beef vindaloo takes just as much experience or skill, if not even more. Right. So I don't really know where that disconnect is, which is unfortunate. And we're starting to see more of that kind of respect based on just base level respect or even money kind of respect based on what we should be paying for these things and getting maybe more of a kind of even playing ground. But when it comes to the menus I wanted to create or the products or flavors I wanted to work with, I would say 99% of the restaurants in Toronto or Canada were not doing it. So when I looked at your top tasting menu like restaurants, they weren't using these types of masalas or these cuts of meat or even these types of proteins. And it's funny because again, I'm in the most multicultural city in the world, and you go into these French, Italian, Nordic style restaurants, 99% of the workforce look like you and I. But yet, when you look at maybe their top management or their flavors, there is no representation. So I'm just like, okay, I've worked in these realms for 10, 15 years. I'm kind of over that point. I want to, one, represent who I am, but also represent this whole wave of, I guess, third kind of cultures here in Canada, but this new wave of, I guess, flavors here in this country, right? Being able to see that diversity maybe a bit more in New York or San Fran or in London, you see that wider range of flavors being represented in that top level of dining. In Canada, I don't really feel we're at that point. We're now trying to really break into that, but me myself again being South Asian, I haven't really seen that representation. So I wanted to take that full creative freedom into that business model. So I bring in the flavors and produce I wanted to work with, and then bring that kind of style of hospitality and service directly to the people. I knew maybe that business model is maybe not the best model to take to market then, and maybe a bit now in our local landscape, because it's a hard business model trying to bring in 50 people for a 10 course tasting menu every
Of
night of the
course.
week. let me
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
that into these private spaces. If it's for
Mm-hmm.
private people in their cottages, on their yachts, in their houses here in Toronto, or now working with top level brands to create these one-off kind of executions of these events, right? One, it's unique events because it's not a la carte. It's all blind tasting menu where I have that creative freedom. But again, it's
Mm-hmm.
flavors that you're not probably going to find, I would say, at 99% of the restaurants in this country. So it's very unique to who I am, and I don't have to bend to the chefs or the owner's rules because I've worked in so many kitchens in this city or country where they're like, you know what, we can't put that much spice into the dish because it's going to be overwhelming for the palate, or that's too
Mm-hmm.
much chili, or no one's going to eat that protein. And I'm like, my family comes from a country with over 1 billion people where we're
Mm-hmm.
lining up around the corner for that cut of meat or for that masala
Mm-hmm.
or for that spice. So the fact that you're saying people aren't going to like that here, I think, pardon my French, that's bullshit. And I just wanted to have that creative freedom where people couldn't say no. So I have
Yeah.
built out, I guess, a business now for myself where if they don't understand the concept, I'm not going to cook
Mm-hmm.
for you. So now when I do cook for my clients, they basically give me their base level restrictions if it's dietary or
Mm-hmm.
any allergies, and then I have full creative freedom. So I basically have that control of cooking for the right people. Because when you're cooking at some of these top rated restaurants, especially with the kind of press, you're not always getting to cook for people who enjoy the food or the
Yeah.
experience. They're like, you know what? We have the money, the means to come. We're going to take our selfie in front of the doors at Noma or The Alchemist, or whatever. Say we've been here, done, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a tick off their list. For me and a lot of the guests I get to cook and work with, they're there for the experience, the food, top to bottom. So it's a lot more wholesome for me and for them. And it's just a greater connection for myself, the diners, and the foods. It's a better ecosystem, I find.
Yeah, I think, and it gives you, as you said, it gives you, I mean, some sort of control over a lot of moving pieces. And I think if you're especially going with this philosophy or a point of view to set, I don't know, set stage for the right narrative, I think it's you need to control all these moving pieces because if not, because I mean, there are many restaurants. I mean, I just know the Indian perspective, but also I know a little bit of like how Mexicans do it or how other gastronomies are doing it. But I think many of them, what they've tried is to mimic what the French or how they got famous, or like I don't know, doing a Gareth service by your table, or serving things in their style, or there are like enough. I think there are enough restaurants. I hope they've died down by now. In Bombay, Mumbai, there's enough restaurants serving sea buckthorn just because somebody in north of Europe is doing it. It makes no sense, but I think mimicking or just nothing's gonna come out. Like this is Ferran Adria said, to create is not to copy, and that's the problem sometimes because many of us, I think, come from this point of view that I want to reclaim the value of my cuisine, but it can't come from just copying. And the ones who have made it, like for example, I don't know, Central, what Virgilio has done, or what Thomas in India has done with the Bombay Canteen, is serving essentially what is being had, and not kind of being somehow sensitive, or I don't know what's the right for the right word, just not being confident about what you're representing and not having to put some makeups to make it like to justify to yourself that you can charge that much. I think it's a tough curve, but I think it's fun once people like them and you do it, it makes of course the path for the others easier. But I mean, we've seen the positives, right? All the positives that you highlighted, like how much freedom and how much creative freedom you have, how you can control what narrative you want to give the diners. But again, it also has a lot of negatives to not only control the menu, but the operations, the administration, the cost of it, all the things that you have to learn that you might not have to learn when somebody else is doing the numbers for you. Having the reservation system and being cooking and then realize that the reservation system has been down and that's why you're not getting reservations. Things like that. How was that for you? Like, did you go through some professional education? Did you depend on colleagues? Did you depend on mentors? How did you get those skills to get full on private dining
Yeah, so
experiences?
definitely a lot of good mentors in this space as well. Some that have like operated in similar realms, if you will. Maybe not the level of kind of service that I'm bringing. Maybe a bit more kind of casual when it comes to, I guess, private like dining and or events or technically catering, right? So they've been able to give me a lot of good insight because it's not like I need to use reservation systems and whatnot. It's kind of direct contact with my guests individually. So yes, I'm wearing a lot of hats, if you will, but pulling on a lot of inspiration or I guess more kind of lessons I've learned from kitchens or restaurants, if you will, but then just dialing in the process, right? It's not like I have to, I guess, bring in as many people as a restaurant. The overhead is a little bit different for sure. And I also looked at like, can I bring this restaurant concept to market as a restaurant? Then I also looked at the top 10 restaurant or top 10 reasons why most restaurants fail. So when I brought this business, I'm like, okay, do I turn this into a brick and mortar or do I bring this experience to people? And when I got that list of the top 10 reasons, I think about nine of those reasons I was able to eliminate with this business model. So yes, there's maybe a different kind of ceiling that can be reached based on the volume of maybe money that can be brought in or the amount of people I can reach with the food. And that's something that I can live with if I can control all these other things. And we all know running these kind of businesses is very stressful when you think of your traditional restaurants, right? So for me, I really wanted to create a better kind of wholesome, balanced lifestyle, if you will. And this was able to offer it up. So being able to lean on prior knowledge from restaurants, again, culinary training at school and whatnot with some of that business back end, but again, leaning on my our friends, right, that we've been able to make over the years, working in these realms to one, learn from them what works and what doesn't, and then just fine tuning that into what works for us.
Yeah, I mean, you've actually. I mean, I'm recently reading this book called The Lean Startup, and they mentioned this what you've just mentioned of like trying and testing models and just trying and canceling. Stick with what works, and what's I mean, the worst that can happen if you try something new is you might fail, and then you jump back into one less thing to care about. And also what you've said about like these depending on networking and mentors, I think that's the biggest takeaway from all the jobs you do, all the contacts you make in this industry. And also like I think it's very important that people listening to this take away of what you correctly said, that you took all the learnings that you had from restaurants. And it's funny for me that many people who are skilled enough and capable enough to do private dining experiences or do pop-ups or collaborate with chefs and do these dinners kind of criticize themselves or like too critical with themselves, and they feel that they lack the business thing. And that's true that you lack the business end till you do it, but believe me, that's not it's not the biggest chunk of the experience that you're going to serve, because the rest of it is you already have it. So I think you're still better prepared than a lot of people who are running restaurants and have no knowledge about food. It's just that they have capital or they have money or they have somebody behind who funds it. So you're always better prepared than those who are opening restaurants with no sense of food, you know?
We've seen so many restaurants or restaurateurs bring these things to market, right? And within
Mm-hmm.
6 months, a year, they fail because they don't have any background knowledge. And again, now we're seeing a wave of cooks and or culinary professionals, creators, if you will, thinking that anyone can become a private or a personal chef, do these private dinners, right? But maybe I take it to a different kind of level than the average person. But there's so much work that goes into it, right? Based on the shopping, the sourcing of said ingredients and bringing that kind of execution or that experience to life is a whole like another world, right? So I feel so many people have gone into this world of private events and private dining and whatnot, but it's a whole nother beast. There's pros and cons, just like any kind of business model. But I think a lot of people underestimate how much actual work goes into building out that kind of concept and offering that at a high kind of level, right? And that's where people like look down on maybe a lot of people going into these realms because it's so much easier to start going into private chef work or doing these events than opening a restaurant. The cost of entry is a lot easier, but finding said clientele is very different, and knowing how to navigate that world is a completely different ballgame. So knowing how to price yourself and how to bring those experiences to life is completely different. And there's again different levels, right? If you're just doing exactly what the client wants, if you're doing your meat and potato kind of dining, for me, obviously, it's a completely different style. Not many people maybe offer what I do. One, maybe because it's a lot more work. But again, maybe that's not where their expertise comes from, right? I'm not really here to come in and just cook you your 5 meals a day or do meal prep work. There are chefs that do that kind of work. But for me, I'm trying to really offer up an experience that's not really offered up in these private spaces. So it's one unique for me, but just as insight for other people, there is so much kind of background work that goes into building out this kind of a model.
I'm curious how this affects your like share with me, like how does it affect your creative process? Because in working in a restaurant where you have somebody who's deciding the menu, where you have somebody who's also like telling you the feedback of guests, because of course you see plates coming back or you see seasons being affecting your menu and things like that, but here with the whole layer of you being the person and completely in touch with the guest and seeing their reactions, seeing how they go through the menu, and I think being more close to the guest themselves, and also the one who's like also the purveyor, who's also the I don't know, also with the beverage and everything. Having this extra exposure, how does it change you, or does it affect your creative process?
I think you know what it makes it a lot better because you're getting the raw upfront detail, right? From sourcing the ingredients, you're putting your hands on every single thing. And when it comes to the service, you're seeing everything. And then when you're interacting with the guests, when you're building a rapport with them, I think it's become more trendy, if you will, in the last decade, if you will, of more chefs running dishes to table or having those open kitchen concepts. So having more of that guest forward kind of interactions for the back of house, which is nice. But for me, getting that kind of interaction with the guests and seeing the reactions to the dishes and seeing if they like something or they don't, those are things I ask all my kind of guests. Are there things that they love? Are there things that they hate? And sometimes it's personal preference, or maybe there is a lack of education or execution in certain ways. That is how we all learn. I don't need like fluff pieces coming in from a server, from a diner that's just saying whatever they want to the server. For me coming out, one, it's vulnerable on my side because I'm not asking, hey, if everything was amazing. If there was something you hated or didn't like, I want to hear that too, because that's the only way I'm going to know, right? So it's, yeah, you're not getting it in volume at a restaurant with 40, 50, 60 covers a night, but you're getting, I would like to think, raw, unfiltered feedback. So I think it really helps with that creative process on knowing where to tweak or change dishes and whatnot, or how the flow of a menu goes and whatnot. But then also, because you're not moving, I guess, quote unquote, product the same way, the way you curate your menus are very different as well, because you're not going to be bringing in hundreds of pounds of produce, right? Especially if you're not doing back to back events, which again, my style events take a lot of energy and effort. You're not moving product maybe as fast. So your menus, maybe from week to week or every 2 weeks, it could be a completely different menu because of how crazy the season changes or how things come in and out of season. So how you build out your and whatnot, or where you pull inspiration for flavor, is more of a driving force for me now than just having everything like basically ready to work with from your local purveyors that you would have at a restaurant, right? So when it comes to a creative standpoint, you have to think, where's your driving force of flavor to create these seasonal menus on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, it's a whole world altogether. I mean, but you ask for it. I mean, you can't complain anymore
Yeah,
because you asked for this freedom, and
that's
I
it.
think it's also like grounds you. It connects you to the food system because you're not just somebody. I mean, if you're wasteful about something, you know the implications of it. If you won't be senseless about putting things on the menu which might cost you. I mean, you're cost effective. I think it's the best way to create these. I mean, this is the case in food. This is also the case in like other examples of architecture or regenerative cities. I think smaller circles are what are the most circular things, because that's where the person is the piece, and that's how
Mhm.
it's the synergy happens, because it's much more controllable. But for me at this point also, it's very interesting how you've mentioned about the challenge that people can have with attracting diners, right?
Mhm.
And with one thing about you also read is the Top Chef experience. I would like to hear that, because Top Chef, of course, affects. I mean, you will tell me about it. Does it get you more influx of diners who are curious to, you know what, I've seen this guy on TV. I would like to see his food as well. So, of course, it has its benefits, but I would like to know your sincere experience of it, and do you recommend it to people? Because there are also people who might see that as their fugitive chef way, to build yourself as a brand, because that gives you a voice and that gives you the freedom to be more daring to do things which are not so common.
Yeah, so definitely a unique experience. I find at least Top Chef Canada maybe a little different on how Top Chef America works, and then of I feel like I could be wrong. I feel these are the only Top Chef shows in the world. Most of the other more professional culinary competition shows are all under the MasterChef kind of brand. When you
Right.
think of MasterChef UK professionals, Italy, Australia, so on. So it's a unique experience. Like you said, it's a great way for branding, for marketing, right? I maybe looking back, I think I might have done it maybe a bit too early in my career because I maybe didn't have my own business, my own restaurant to promote. Because at the end of the day, it is more of a marketing kind of branding monster or a machine that you can use to your advantage. I was a sous chef at the time at a restaurant. And then we filmed it leading up to COVID. And then the episode or the season actually aired within the first couple weeks of lockdown. So all the kind of public events, all the promo work, all the things that we would normally be able to capitalize on, we couldn't do. So even with all the branding and the marketing, I couldn't do a pop-up or anything in Toronto for 2 years because we were in a lockdown for 2 years, more or less straight. So we weren't really able to capitalize on that. That was just poor timing of the world. I can't really control that. But the overall experience, at least for Top Chef Canada, I can only speak to, it's more of a game show than a competition because it's not maybe realistic into how the day-to-day operations are in a restaurant, right? They're giving you 30 minutes to create a dish and expecting you to come out with a top class Michelin level kind of dish, where we both know when you're creating these menus or dishes, I've spent days, weeks, months, sometimes years based on some of the touches to bring these dishes to life. So it definitely takes a hit on your mental or your psyche when you're getting maybe critiqued in a certain way based on something you had to pull together based on a weird scope within 30 minutes. So it's not maybe as, I think a lot of people, especially outside of the industry, don't understand it's not realistic to what our day to day actually looks like in these realms. And a lot of people, I don't think, take that when they're coming in as a competitor, knowing that this is what it is. It is more of that kind of game show because they're giving you sometimes non realistic kind of scopes for a challenge, right? So I tell anyone, I told myself, I tell more people that are going on to these shows, one, look at it from a marketing and a branding standpoint and just to have fun with it. You don't really have control because looking, especially working more on the back end of different kind of media now within the food world, they have TV ratings that they have to meet, right? They need viewership. They need certain drama. There's certain things on a back end for a production company that they have to meet. And even on a show I did years prior, one of the producers came up to me, which is pretty jokes right before I stepped on set saying, just remember the best chef doesn't always win.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing that there's always a certain kind of narrative that they're looking for, if they're scripted or unscripted shows, there's ways that things are certain pushed based on the sponsorships, based on how they want to see things play out, right? Their bottom line is not to showcase or to have the best chef always win. It's what's going to bring the ratings in, what's going to bring dollars in so they can come back for a new season. So really
Mm-hmm.
just going in with the kind of right mindset, knowing what these shows actually are and not letting that affect you too much. Because I've seen a lot of people, myself included, get
Mm-hmm.
demoralized, right? Because you don't always get to showcase your true self. You're not always cooking for people that might understand your flavors, right? Especially for me, coming where I come from and using my flavors, you're not always
Mm-hmm.
cooking for judges that are chefs or that have worked in those realms or understand those flavors, right? So they might not understand these little nuances or flavors because they haven't grown up with them or they haven't worked or traveled to those parts of the world. They might say, oh, this is too light or this is too bold or this is too acidic or whatever. But I'm like, this is how it authentically is. But if you've never been in these realms, like,
Exactly.
how are you going to critique me on that? So I feel there's a lot of disconnect there. And I hopefully these shows can do better down the line, bringing in these kind of discerning voices or maybe more modern voices as judges. So yeah, I just say take the whole thing with a grain of salt when it comes down to the critiquing of your food, but looking at it more from that kind of marketing and branding thing, right? And knowing
Mm.
if and when to do it, right?
Right.
When to do it in your career. And not everyone is made for TV to bring out
Mm-hmm.
that kind of personality because that is what they look for. Yeah, it is base level cooking skills, but if you're a great chef or a great cook, but you have no personality, you're never going to be on this show. So it's so many things that they look for. So it's a lot of things to keep in mind and knowing what to put into it and what you can take out of it as well. So it has, I can't say it has opened many doors here, but also going overseas, a lot of people look down upon it because these shows are more Hollywood coming out of North
Mm.
America. So because it's not as maybe clean cut as I look at it as MasterChef UK professionals, because a lot of my friends have done the shows. One of my old chef from Brighton won the show itself years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to get his insight on how the UK show works. And you're bringing on one and two, sometimes Michelin star chefs to compete. Where here they're bringing on caterers, private chefs, restaurant chefs. They're bringing so many different kinds of people and different kind of activations or challenges. So it's very different where some of us, we've worked for 10 years straight doing tasting menus. And then they're like, okay, you're doing this challenge. It's -5 outside or 5 degrees. And you got to cook for 300 people on a butane burner. It makes no sense. How am I going to portray my best self? And then you
Yeah.
get those critiques and it messes with you mentally, but you just have to understand
Definitely.
this is what it is, right? And just
Yeah.
knowing that, hey, this is what it's going to be like. Just enjoy the process. So I feel a lot of people put too much weight or too much pressure on themselves when they're competing on these shows. But even for, I guess, the general public, knowing that this isn't the realistic world of what it's like to be in a chef or be a chef in a lot of these areas. So open, I guess, say maybe some doors here. Some of my guests have hired me because they're like, oh, we've seen you on TV and whatnot, which is, hey, which is great. But again, just staying true to your authentic self. Some people might put on a personality. So if it's content I put out on socials or on TV, that is who I am. On these shows, at least for Top Chef, they're editing it down and you basically sign away your rights. So it is on how they want to depict you. But yeah, it's an interesting world when it comes to food TV, especially from when I was growing up, seeing the likes of Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay, and whatnot. It's food TV is a whole nother world. But now with social media at the forefront of media and whatnot, we have a lot more control. So we're seeing a lot more content creators and chefs and whatnot going that route because they have full control. So it's great to see, I think, those areas leveraged a lot more, and you're starting to see a lot more content on Instagram, TikTok, even YouTube and whatnot, taking over the old school world of, say, the Food Network here in North America, where people have more control over their voice and how they want to depict and showcase themselves, which honestly I think is great. And it's a lot more wholesome and a lot more authentic. And I think that world of content and food media, I think we're, again, at the tip of the iceberg on what this new world can be. But I think we're going to find a lot more authentic, kind of holistic content come to market than these high dramatized game show like,
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't sum it up better. I mean, in the end, it's key, and be it with private dining or be it with kind of portraying yourself in media, I think you have to be careful with how much access you give. I mean, people to something, but also you said very, very well that you need to know what you're getting into. You need to go with a grain of salt, and also if you can make and if you can match your priorities with the television or the producer's priorities to make your brand, or to know when is the right time to if you are a product and how do you find the product market fit. I think it's a very business point of view. You have to look at it as a
that's it.
as selling yourself, and there's nothing wrong with selling yourself as long as you've established what you want to sell, how you want to sell, and when is it going to be for you the
Mhm.
right time. And I think also what you touched upon this is demoralization, and how chefs have this does have effect on chefs of either people watching or people being in it, people not even getting to be on it because they have, like, say, put their names on a list and they don't get to be there and things like that. And that connects me and gives me the right time to pivot on to the Burnt Chef project. I would like to know more about this. I've read about it. I've seen how the initiative works, but I think it's very, very unique by itself. But yeah, it would be nice first of all you just tell us on what's it about, how you come to know about it, and what does it work like.
Yeah, so the Burnt Chef Project is a NGO organization that started in the UK, I believe in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, with our main mission to break the stigma around mental health within the food and hospitality sector, as we know, is has been a massive issue and or problem for years, and probably more so now than ever. With burnout, with the different kind of problems that we've had around substance abuse, racism, even sexual abuse and whatnot in our industry, and then even thinking about some of the icons that we've lost, unfortunately, to the problems with mental health and the problems with suicide, right? And people thinking, unfortunately, that is the only option at the end of the day. So when you think of top level Michelin star chefs losing a star, and unfortunately with the kind of pressures of keeping those appearances up or keeping their stars there, and how much work and effort it takes to keep that, or even when you think of food media, we recently lost a massive chef that was a resident on the Food Network in the States, and especially Anthony Bourdain years ago, who is an international icon. These are all people that unfortunately lost their battle with their own mental health, right? So this NGO or this movement has really started pre-COVID, massively blown up throughout, and now has reach around the whole world. One, around just breaking the stigma again around mental health, and then creating free access to support mechanisms, to training, to education, to support, to really help anybody who is in need. If it's down to the line cooks, the owners and operations or owners and operators of said businesses, all the way up to culinary schools. So we, as an international organization, we've been in hundreds of countries around the world, giving talks to culinary schools, to massive businesses, working at some of the biggest trade shows here in North America, across Europe, and really trying to, one, just build awareness about this problem within our line of work, but then also showcasing the solutions. Because I feel it's easy to say, hey, this is a problem. And that was one thing I was always taught. Never bring a problem to your chef. You can bring the problem, but make sure that you have a solution ready to go. And that was, I guess, the main scope of our founder, now all our ambassadors. I'm one of the chief ambassadors here in Canada for the movement, about creating open places to talk about what is going on, and the problems, but again, creating or helping build out the support systems. So if it's training around maybe the substance abuse problems that we have within our line of work, or even around burnout and how to really take care of our body and our mind, things that maybe were never put as an importance in our line of work. And knowing that if we don't take care of our diet, our sleep, our physical and mental health, and working these hours and with these kind of pressures, like this is where it can lead to. And we're seeing this time and time again. And it's, I don't want to get obviously too dark, but like how many people do we have to lose to their mental health within this industry for us to really take this seriously? So we've worked with some of the biggest organizations in Europe, in US, in Canada, and so many different parts of the world. Really, one was our main step was to just build awareness that this is happening, and now to showcasing this is what we have brought to market to really help support people. So coming in to do trainings and whatnot, if that's in person, virtually, you name it. We are working with so many organizations with donations to bring this basically to the general public for free. So no matter who you are, you can go on to this interface. If it's on their website, going on to their podcasts and whatnot, so many different realms that we've built out for us to offer up support. And even with a crisis hotline, if you are at that kind of brink, there's 24/7 text or call hotlines where we patch you in directly in to this hotline with trained therapists to help you talk things out. Because obviously the last thing we want is someone to think that their only option is to take their own life, right? So really trying to focus on that major issue, and that's one of big reasons I've taken that step back to focus on these problems, right? I find looking again, going back when I built out this Wanderlust private dining kind of experiences, I'm like, let's look at these reasons why restaurants don't always do well or collapse or fail. And a big part is your high turnover rate, or again, we've been in labor shortages in Toronto, Canada, around the world for years. Look at the main reasons why. Why should I bring a restaurant to market if, sure, I can pay myself maybe decently well, or my sous chef or the head chef or whatever, but then we're struggling to find dishwashers or server assistants, whatever. Why not actually focus on the real issues? So if and when I do bring a brick and mortar to market, we have a sustainable business product. We've always looked at sustainability from produce, where it's sourced from, how we deal with it, the waste that goes into the garbage. Yes, that's beautiful, but this organization is focused on the sustainability of people. And I feel if we focus on that first, everything else will follow. So I feel we've always focused on the end goal of zero waste. And it's great to see these restaurants around the world that have built sustainable kind of models based on their food practices, but it'd be great to see that recognition on the staffing. It's great to see the Michelin Guide give out your green stars, if you will, but why not give out another star, if you will, for restaurants that are building sustainable practices for the people working within? If that's based on the hours, the benefits, the health benefits, the food systems, you name it. I feel that is where the biggest priority should be placed within said businesses, and everything else will follow.
No, I totally agree with what you said, because it's funny that even if they don't consider like giving another star or giving another recognition, I think if they just stop like awarding people who are abusing and exploiting workforce, or also like, I mean, all these sustainable restaurants that you've mentioned, and we have been on the inside and we know how these restaurants get sustainable. I mean, making an ice cream from almond milk waste, or using a lot of things which are going into waste, is being done, yes, and that is nice if you extend the life of a product and take it to the most extremes of it. But again, at what cost? Is that being done by your staff having to stay extra for that kind of operation? Is it actually sustainable? Or maybe you just need to compost it and not have to have your staff work extra hours to make it sustainable, so that you can have a story behind this dish that you will then serve, and then the Michelin inspector will find that your restaurant is sustainable because you served this dish, and you completely forget the human factor behind it. And I think the job that's being done, I think it's Chris Hall is the founder, if I'm not wrong, and everybody behind it, people like you who are being ambassadors of it. I think it's a very important job, and it's very interesting for me, because I think not many restaurants or not many things done by chefs have been able to grow up in scale and volume to be able to connect chefs together. I think many people have tried starting like chef communities and built a network around it. But I think what you guys have achieved with it, also the content I've seen, like the material that is, which is very resourceful, the helpline that you mentioned. So I think kudos to you for yeah, being a part of something like this. And yeah, I think it's something very important. I hope the governments and restaurants, or these entities which kind of not control restaurants but have a kind of say of how restaurants will function in the future, I hope they give enough importance to this. They see the movement that's happening, which is made by the people that will make this industry work or stop where it is or redefine or leave it. So I think it's important to take care of these values.
And that's it. Like we both have, right, a lot of love and passion for this line of work. And I only want to have more people, inspire more people to come into this industry to work in so many different like ways that we can, right? But it's about creating the right environment for them. With the younger generation putting more of an importance on their well-being, their time management, all these things, that's the generation that's going to come working as these young commie chefs and whatnot before they go on to bigger roles and whatnot. But if these practices aren't going to be put into place, none of these people are going to come work.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see, unfortunately, more of these businesses and restaurants, unfortunately, close or fail in short terms. But like, it's just create these realms. The younger generation will come in, and then they're going to create these beautiful kind of restaurants or experiences for us. So I think that importance has to be done from a restaurant standpoint, but also things that should be taught in all these culinary schools, right? Based on your mental and your physical well-being and just how to deal with recovery, what you should do maybe before shift, after shift, because I've had so many friends that maybe they have 2 to 3 Red Bulls or energy drinks during service,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have heart problems at the age of mid 30s. Or I have friends that are in their mid 40s and they've had knee replacements or hip replacements because they've been bending or like cooking the wrong way. All these different things, right? That we've never put an importance on. We have to think about them before they're a problem instead of after the fact. And I think the more that we can do that, we'll build a lot better of a sustainable industry for everyone around the world. So it's nice that the Burnt Chef has built an international recognition around, I would say, most of the biggest countries around the world. And now we're starting to really delve into most countries, which is really nice to see ambassadorships around the countries or around the world, really one, building the awareness, but now building smaller cohorts within. With it starting in the UK, working with the NHS and with top brands, and now expanding and starting as our own charitable organization in Canada, in the US, working with local government organizations to build out more kind of support. So as this NGO or initiative grows, we're going to start now partnering with bigger entities to really build out these kind of support systems. Because one, it's nice to have that international recognition for the company or the NGO, but it's nice to have one kind of community because you have all these
Mm-hmm.
small ones around the world, but for one massive global hub, it's a great way to have a network or that community base for all of us that work within this line of work.
Yeah, I think it's super important because I speak to a lot of chefs through the podcast, outside the podcast, through work, and a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of friction. Even if I'm not in restaurants right now, I hear about it. And I know there's a lot of friction with the younger workforce going in, and I mean, it all depends on how, as somebody who's been in the industry and has had it the hard way, can take it. Either you can see it, as many of them see it, as the younger generation doesn't want to work. They're complaining a lot. They want to know what they're gonna get before they know what they're gonna give. Or you can see it in a way, this is a generation which is more aware. This is a generation which is comfortable with saying that, okay, I'm seeing a therapist, or that I'm going for counseling. It's a generation which is more aware about their emotions. Of course, it's also a generation which is certainly privileged, which is not coming out of a war, and is not going for just the first job that they can find. But I mean, that's their reality. And if they're asking questions, you can't just criticize that they're asking questions, but you need to look. I mean, even if that was your normal, you can't just keep going with it just because it was that was your normal and it's not somebody else's normal, and they have all the right to ask. I think it's platform like these which can kind of reduce this friction, because if you already equip these chefs, not just the younger generation, to have these tools, but also the chefs who are receiving this younger generation to kind of have the right tools to answer these questions, to be understanding what perspective somebody who's asking for these things is coming from, I think this kind of would set the right platform to be able to stop this rotation, the fluctuation, the rotation that's happening, which is not good for business in general. If it's not good for business, it's not good for any of us. So yeah, super interesting, all the work coming out of this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Because we've as again, I'm not a parent yet, but the older
Mm-hmm.
generation, we've been taught to ask these questions or just to ask questions in general. So now as younger people are coming to the workforce and they're asking questions, the older generation's like, why you do like just do the work type thing, right? Like, why don't you just put your head down? And that's how I was taught, right? But I'm like, we've trained a whole generation to stand up for themselves, to ask these questions, to be in better workplaces. But then when they come asking them, we get angry about it, or we're not happy at the fact that they're asking for like what the benefit is of working in these organizations. It's not like, oh, I can just now put this name on my resume, but I have to work for 16 hours a day for free or minimum wage, and I barely have a place to live and or eat. That I think that mentality has shifted, and there's still a time and a place to do these kind of internships. But I think the bottom line or that bottom bar has to be raised for any of these kind of businesses or restaurants to keep moving forward with.
Definitely. I mean, like using that as the right moment, I think just some thoughts on wrapping up, Imran. If I had to like ask you about like think about yourself when you were in this position of like, I mean, for many of us, COVID happened and like things happened in life, events happened that led us to like, rethink, okay, where I am, is it the right place? Am I capable of more? Should I start this private dining experience? Should I go for Top Chef and things like this, which lead to a pivot outside the kitchen? I think the easy way is to just be in the circle like a hamster and keep going on what you're doing. But for people listening to this, it's people who are kind of inspired by stories like yours and they want to do more outside the kitchen. What kind of advice or what kind of inspiration could you give to people who are listening and they know they want to pivot? They also know where they want to pivot to, but they just feel it's easier to be where I am right now. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing, especially because I do a lot of, I guess, mentorship or like work like this to help these transitions or just that inspiration as you're coming into the industry is pairing up those kind of passions, right? We've all come into this industry to begin with. If you're pivoting in the industry or out of it or coming into it, knowing where these kind of passions lie, right? Because we came into it loving food. But I think that's the other thing that people have to understand is that we're not just chefs. We're not just people that cook or work with food. There's a million other things out there that we love. And there's ways to monetize that or build a career around it. For example, I've grown up loving did photography my whole life, videography kind of work and whatnot. So pairing off passions like that, really trying to think where are these kind of synergies? Do you have, as you mentioned, you love sociology, a lot of academic work, right? How can that be paired off with food? So I think a lot of people have to think about, okay, we have this base kind of passion for the food world or that industry, but what is another passion that we can pair it with that's going to really bring a lot of passion to our life on the day to day and that isn't maybe just in the traditional realm of working in these restaurants, right? So when you think of obviously the my friend Nick, knowing his love for foraging and just being outdoors in general, and the fact that I would say 9 times out of 10, most of his days spent outside in nature. He's pairing those two passions together, right? Still being attached to restaurants, still doing dinners and events, but bringing those worlds together. One of my other friends here in Canada worked as a chef for years, but now has gone into marketing and sales, but is doing that for one of the top culinary or food-based brands in the world. So again, there's so many ways to pivot. It's just really thinking that it's not just me working with food. I can work with food indirectly and still be part of this world, but pairing in those other interests, if that's around working within NGOs or education or sustainability. I think at least growing up in these traditional realms of education and whatnot, we've been like racehorses, work, put your head down and just push. And we've been given these kind of blinders not to look around, but really trying to take that time to step back, think about what else do I love? Do I love to travel, et cetera? And how can I build that into my career and build something that's maybe a lot more rewarding for myself, my family long term, and just knowing that there is a career or potential for you to build out good money or a good return for your life.
Super, super, super inspiring what you've said. I mean, looking inwards is the only way to move forward, and I mean, if you can be in this position where you can combine passions, when those passions sometimes are not the most obvious, sometimes they're not even like you can't directly connect them to a product or a service or something that you can sell. But I think looking inwards, like what Nick has done, for example, foraging, who would think you can make a career out of this and then consult restaurants on how to do that, help them out to learn that. I think you have to be creative and most chefs have it in them because the job requires you to be creative. But I think sometimes you need to stop and look inwards on what else are we capable of. But yeah, thank you so much, Imran. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking time out. And it's so nice to have somebody with your kind of experience, with your kind of contribution that you're making to the industry today on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man. Absolute pleasure.